Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.
And I listen to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast.
Indeed you are, people who listen to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Welcome to another edition with your host for this particular episode, Machel St. Patrick Hewitt. For those of you who are new to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, I'm one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And well, we've been going for what now? 3 years? 3 years? YouTube, not so much, actually. If you're watching this on YouTube, this channel's only really been a thing for about the last year and a bit or so. So thank you to anybody who has become a subscriber in that time. A couple of weeks ago, we were on the road to 4K subscribers. We've passed that. We've passed that milestone. We've passed that threshold. We're now on the road to 5K subscribers. So if you're new to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe. If you're listening to this on the podcast platform of your choosing, leave a review if you can. And also share, like, and let people know. Anybody who you know who's got a keen interest in West Indies cricket, let them know about what we do. This is the one place where you're going to hear and get detailed analysis on all things West Indies cricket. And the reason why I say all things West Indies cricket, because it's about the boys, it's about the girls, it's about the women, it's about the men, it's about the stakeholders, it's about you, the fans. We offer everything: live call-in shows, interviews with players, interview with key stakeholders. If you haven't listened to our most recent episode, we just had an interview with Justice Patrick Thompson, who chaired the independent report into the 2022 debacle at the T20 World Cup. And that's led to a lot of short-term, medium-term and long-term recommendations that himself, Brian Lara and Mickey Arthur believe that Cricket West Indies should take on. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, do go back and listen to that one first. Fascinating interview with Justice Patrick Thompson. But this particular, actually, before I say that, I was about to say this particular episode. No. Let me remember. If you'd like to support the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, head to www.patreon.com/Carib Cricket, and you can become a patron of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast for as little as £2, $2, €2, €2, to Jamaican dollars, whatever your currency might be, and you can become a supporter of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I should have put on the brand new hats. I should have put. You know what, people? One second. That you're not supposed to do this in a video, but let me try a little thing. Here it is. Let me record this one in the brand new Caribbean Cricket Podcast test caps. Make sure you get one of these, people. How well can you see them? The brand new. They just come out. We always do. We do merch. For those of you new to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, we do merch as well. So get yourself a brand new Caribbean Cricket Podcast test cap, international cap. We've just sent out the first, I think, 4 or 5 orders of these particular caps. They've gone out to all, I think, people in the UK have had a couple of orders. I think 4 orders, in fact, from the United States. So those will go out. Those will go out next week to those who've made orders from abroad. So do get in touch if you want one of these brand spanking new Caribbean Cricket Podcast test caps in maroon, to fit your maroon jerseys, your West Indies colours, etc., etc. So get at me, people. Anyways, let's get into it. This episode is about the West Indies women's team, the senior team. We've just had the Under-19 World Cup, Under-19 World Cup, and the Under-19 women's team got through to the Super 6 stage. They didn't win any games in the Super 6 stage. Of course, there was the somewhat surprising defeat to Rwanda women, which I've done a video on. You can go back into the recent archives and have a look at that video. And then, of course, they got hammered by England women in the Super Sixes as well. But that tournament was always going to be a learning curve tournament for the Under-19 women's team. They'd only come together really and truly in the last 6 and a bit months, and it was about what they could take out of the tournament. They beat Indonesia, they beat Ireland, lost to New Zealand, lost to Rwanda, and lost to England, but kind of achieved the objective of getting through to the Super 6 stage. So there were some key learning points for them, and you'd like to think that some of those under-19 players, particularly after when this upcoming T20 senior women's tournament, which starts next month, when that comes to an end, I would like to see that tournament almost become like, I guess, what do I want to say here? I'd like to see that tournament become the defining marker for when Courtney Walsh and the kind of backroom staff, the West Indies women, decided that, you know what, it's now time to transition out some of the older members of that senior side and starts to bring through some of the under-19 players like a Zayda James. That doesn't mean that someone like Zayda James is ready, or Trishan Holder is definitely ready to be part of the West Indies women's senior team, but we're gonna have to start trusting in youth and trying to develop them over a long period of time. Of course, there is the Cricket West Indies Women's Academy, which will be starting later this year as well. So you'll see the most talented youngsters, women in the region under the age of 23 will be part of that academy. So you would assume the likes of Zayda James, Janaba Joseph, Cumberbatch, I'd like to see in there. Chanel, basically, essentially the under-19 team. Sorry, you'd like to think that the large majority of that West Indies women's under-19 team will make up the Cricket West Indies Women's Academy. And I'd like to think that Courtney Walsh will identify very, very quickly the most talented members of that under-19 team and start to include them after the T20 World Cup going forward with the senior side as well. Now, why have I gone down that route? I guess I've gone down that route because possibly unbeknownst, so much attention goes on the men's senior side and the kind of under-19 men's side as well, and even men's domestic cricket, that unless you're a true connoisseur of West Indies cricket, it's possibly gone under the radar for you that the West Indies women don't really win that many matches. At the moment, the West Indies women are in South Africa ahead of the T20 World Cup, which of course will be in South Africa. We're currently partaking in a tri-series. And in fact, when this comes out, I'll drop this tonight, which is the 29th of January. But by the time most of you watch this, the game against India, which is our final match in this tri-series, will start on the 30th. It may well even be going on as some of you are watching this. And we're likely to lose that match, okay, because there's such a significant gap between the quality of the Indian women's side and our side, right? But if you look at our last set of performances, we've played 3 matches so far in this tri-series. 2 versus South Africa, 1 versus India, lost all of them. Prior to that, and I'm just talking T20s, by the way, prior to that, we played 5 T20s versus England in the Caribbean. We lost all of them. Prior to that, we played 5 T20s. I think it was 5 versus, let me just double check that. Yeah, 5 T20s versus New Zealand in the Caribbean. We only won 1 of them. So in essence, in our last 13 T20s, we've only won 1 match. And that was against New Zealand at home in a series that we lost 4-1. As we head and go into a T20 World Cup, I cannot say that our chances are that good. And that's not to criticize the West Indies women's senior side. That's not to criticize Courtney Walsh. I think it's to be realistic about where we are at as a women's side. And it's funny because last year we got to the semi-finals of the ODI World Cup. And that was a huge overachievement. For those who don't remember, that was in New Zealand. For those who don't remember that World Cup, we beat the host New Zealand first up. Then we beat England. And from the point we beat those 2 first up, we only really need, I think we lucked out with the kind of rained off game against South Africa, but we also beat Bangladesh. And that was enough to get us, Bangladesh women, that was enough to get us into the semi-finals. And that's the ODI World Cup, I should say. But in many ways, I feel like that's a bit of a misnomer of a tournament, because some people may well look at that tournament and say, oh, well, the West Indies women got to the ODI World Cup semi-finals just last year, so we should be able to get to the T20 semi-finals this year. No. And one of the biggest reasons why is because of course, Deandra Dottin. Deandra has now stepped away from the West Indies women's side, and it has left a massive gap in the side. And yes, people will inevitably say in the comments below in this video, or maybe you'll at us at Carib Cricket on Twitter and Instagram, you may well at us and say, stop talking about Deandra. She's gone now. Like, she's not in the team now. And I hear that. I hear all that. But it's not just about Deandra. If you look at the last 13 T20 matches we've played, we suffered as well because Stefani's been injured for a large majority of it. They picked Stefani for this current tri-series against South Africa and India, and she's not played any matches because they're reluctant to use her in these games because they're not 100% certain that she's 100% fit, and they want to make sure that if she is fit, she's fit for the World Cup. But the problem is, and Stefani is one of our arguably is the best player in the team. Obviously, some people say Hayley Matthews, but technically, you'd argue that Stefani Taylor is certainly more it's open for historically more consistent with the bat than than Hayley Matthews, or better with the bat historically than Hayley Matthews. But Stefani hasn't played in such a long time that it's going to be asking a massive amount of her to come off the back of basically not playing any games and only doing nets and training to suddenly then fire in a T20 World Cup. But let's not get this twisted. This team needs Stefani Taylor badly, because the issue that this West Indies women's side has had for the longest while, since effectively Deandra stepped aside, is the batting's just not up to scratch. It's at the moment, the West Indies women's batting is Hayley Matthews or bust. That's effectively what it is. And for those of you who watch our Caribbean Cricket Podcast award show at the end of 2022, when it came round to awarding the ODI awards and T20 awards for bowler and batter, or best bowler, best batter in the women's team, Hayley Matthews won everything except best batter. We gave that to Deandra Dottin for ODIs, but Hayley Matthews won everything else. Best bowler in ODIs, best batter in T20s, best bowler in T20s. That's how far away and ahead she is from her peers within the side. And that's not even to say like Hayley is like a world beater. Hayley herself would say that she's still trying to work on her game to be more consistent. But in the context of West Indies women, she's way and above everybody else. So what I did was I went and pulled some stats. You know I love a stats. You know I love a statistical analysis. And this is why people, when West Indies are looking for a new head selector in the next 2 years or so, I'm actually going to apply. I love a statistical analysis. In the last 13 T20 matches that the West Indies women have played, we have only passed 105 runs 6 times, less than half. So less than half of the matches we've played in the last, when was that New Zealand series? Essentially, New Zealand came, when did New Zealand come again? Was it July, September? Effectively, give or take the last 6 months of T20s, the West Indies women have only passed 105 runs 44% of the time, or is it 48% of the time, right? If you want an understanding of why we don't win T20s, there's your answer. Because effectively, the majority of the time that we come to bat, we are asking our bowlers to do an absolute miracle to keep us in the game, because the batters have not turned up. In the 3 T20, in this tri-series that we're playing against South Africa and India, these have been our scores so far. 97, 111, 97. Against England in the series just gone, our scores were, and this is working back from the 5th T20 to the 1st, 43. These are all out, by the way. 82, 140, 125, 105. And then before that, New Zealand, 101, 111, 93, 107, 115. People, the evidence is there. And we won. That one where we scored 115, we won the game with 115. The one where we scored 111, we tied the game with 111. I think we lost in the super over. So the low scores with the bat, generally speaking, can't win us games. And the only way those scores win you games is against the quote unquote weaker sides in the women's game. And I'm not saying New Zealand are a weaker side. I mean, they beat us 4-1 in the T20 series in the Caribbean, but they're probably closer to us in ability than certainly England, South Africa, and India are. These scores of like 97 and 105 and 101, though you can't beat England and India with those scores. You can't even beat South Africa with those scores. And I guess what's a bit galling is at the start of 2022, we went to South Africa and we were relatively competitive versus South Africa at the start of 2022. But again, there's a difference. We had Deandra, we had Stefanie Taylor. This current iteration of the West Indies women's side is suffering for losing the world boss in Deandra and Stefanie Taylor being perpetually not injured, I guess I would say. I was about to say not fit, but injured. So I went and did a bit more digging and I looked at the current try series. In the current try series, Hayley Matthews, like I say, lots of you will be listening to this when we're playing India on the 30th, which is effectively nearly like 12, just over 12 hours away at the time of me recording this. In the current try series, Hayley Matthews has the most runs in the side, 91 from her 3 matches. The next highest run score in terms of aggregate runs is Shemaine Campbell with 59 runs. The next person after that, this is all people have played 3 matches, by the way, is Shabika Gajnabi with 36 runs. Do you see what I mean? The gap between Hayley and the rest is absurd, right? If you go back to the England series that we played, where they won all the games, both ODIs and T20s, but if you look at the T20 series, the highest run scorer across the 5 matches, aggregate run scorer, was Hayley Matthews, and she only scored 74 runs across the 5 matches. Next highest, Rashada Williams, 69. Next highest, Afi Fletcher, 47. People, this isn't good enough. When New Zealand came, the highest run scorer, aggregate runs across the 5 T20s, Hayley Matthews, 119 runs. Next person, Aaliyah Elaine, 85. Next person, Kashona Knight, 76. After that, the next person had 47 across 5 matches. I haven't even got time really and truly to deep dive into the bowling, because for me, the bowling's not the issue. I can look at the West Indies bowling and I can call Shakira Selman, I can call Connell, I can call Ramarak, I can call Afi Fletcher. And I know Anisa Mohammed's missing. So in fairness, I just said that we're missing Deandra Dottin. We can't be forget that we're also missing Anisa Mohammed, who's taken a break from cricket. But like I say, with the bowling, I can call Fraser. I can call Hayley Matthews herself. I can call, did I say Chanel Henry? I can call a Chanel Henry. So the bowling for me isn't the issue, because I know that more often than not, we will have at least 1 or 2, 3 bowlers that will turn up and can make an impact. And that's without Anisa Mohammed. But our batting is so weak that we cannot guarantee that anybody else can sharp with the bat alongside Hayley Matthews. That's the issue. If Hayley was kind of producing the runs that she's producing, and this is at the top level, remember, versus South Africa, versus England, versus New Zealand, versus India, we can guarantee that Hayley will always top our run aggregates. The problem is there's nobody else who consistently can do it alongside her. When I gave you the names of the second highest run scorer versus in this try series versus England versus New Zealand, it's not the same people. So there's no consistency with regards to other people regularly putting their hands up. And maybe that's because some players actually are reaching that point where they're going to need to be transitioned out of the side. Maybe some players have lost all kinds of form. Maybe some players like a Rashada Williams are in their developmental stage and are slowly improving, but they're not quite there yet. And again, this is why I bring up someone like a Stefanie Taylor. This team needs Stefanie Taylor so badly that how well we perform in the World Cup may well hinge on how fit and how eager, I guess I want to say, Stefani is to still prove herself at the top level, because Hayley can't do it all on her own. Hayley can't do it all on her own with the bat. And I haven't even got onto the batting order. I haven't even got onto the issues around the batting order, because even when Stefani comes back, how are they going to we had this issue even with Stefani, Deandra and Hayley in the team. How they configure the batting order is going to be an issue. Deandra's now gone. What is the best place to play a Hayley Matthews? I would assume that Stefani Taylor, they'll put her up to like number 3 or something like that. But where's the best spot to play Hayley? In recent games in this tri-series, they're putting her at number 5. But I don't even know if that's the most logical thing to do. Part of me gets it, because I guess if you put Hayley at the top and she gets out, you're pretty much saying to yourself, well, boy, the game's gone. But once Stefani comes back, they have to work out what is the best way to use Hayley. Is it to go top heavy and have Hayley and Stefani both come in the top 3, top 4? Or do you leave Hayley at the back end to try and chase a game if we're still in the game? So there's even all of that decision making to think about. In a recent interview, I think it was after the third T20 that we lost, the one where South Africa chased down the 97 to win in like 9 overs or something. They didn't even lose a wicket. So Courtney Walsh in the press conference essentially was like, yeah, we got completely outplayed. But Courtney did make a point. He said that there's going to be a desire from some, I'm paraphrasing, but effectively intimated that there's going to be a desire from some to say, well, boy, West Indies women's are rucks and they can't beat no one, and they can't make no runs and da-da-da-da-da. But he said, and he called 5 names, and he said, all of these players are missing from the side at the moment. And he said, I don't think you can make a true analysis. So this is why I'm telling you lot, because I think this is valid. I don't think you can make a true analysis and conclusion about where the side's at without considering that all of these players are to come back and will be more than likely in the World Cup squad. Aaliyah Lane isn't playing right now. Shakira Selman has been called back, but let me just bring up my information. Shakira Selman has only played 1 match in this tri-series. Stefani Taylor is in the squad, but they're trying to hold her off for the World Cup. Shadeen Nation's only played 2 matches. Chanel Henry has got an injury at the moment, so she's not played either. So he called, and like I say, Aaliyah Lane's not played any either. So he called those 5 names and he said, the reality of the situation, and again, I'm paraphrasing, he said, the reality of the situation is those 5 players, Aaliyah Lane, Chanel Henry, Shakira Selman, Stefani Taylor, and Shadeen Nation, he said they're all starters in the side. Really and truly, they are all first team players. And he said, he effectively intimated that West Indies women are not in a position where they can just lose half their team and be completely competitive. And I'm making right with that. And that's why I've thrown these comments in, because I think we have to have balance. We have to add the context and we have to add balance. And I think Courtney makes a good point there. We are not in a position to lose Deandra Dottin and then Aaliyah Lane and Chanel Henry and Shakira Selman and Stefani Taylor and Shadeen Nation, and then look at the team and go, why can't you compete versus South Africa? Why can't you compete versus India? How comes you're getting licked down by everyone? To be competitive, we need everybody fit. And even then, that might not be good enough. But certainly, given the state of the women's game or the state of the side right now, they need every single player fit and available to be able to pull off shots, to be able to run games close. And we just don't have that luxury right now. The upcoming World Cup, we are going to be in Group B, for those who don't know. And our first World Cup game is literally about 2 weeks away. And boy, oh boy, we start against England. So let me just tell you this, because our World Cup could be over effectively after 2 games, right? We are in Group B, and in our group is England, India, Ireland, Pakistan. Now, on the surface, you would look at that group and say, right, so West Indies women, if everybody's fit and all is well, should beat Ireland and should, I hope, beat Pakistan. That's the minimum expectation I think the team has to go into this World Cup with. Only the top 2 go through to the semi-final. So then what a West Indian fan has to ask themselves is, what is the likelihood of West Indies pulling off a shock win versus England or India in a one-off T20 game in the World Cup? And that is effectively, everyone's going to have their own answer, but that is effectively what the T20 World Cup for West Indies will hinge on. But here's the problem. The first game we play in the T20 World Cup is versus England. So we could take a lick down to begin with. Our second game in the T20 World Cup is versus India. Now you understand why I'm saying our World Cup could be over within, when's that India game? That India game is on the 15th of February. So our World Cup could effectively be over by the 15th of Feb, because we will have to beat one of England or India. And then, of course, try and beat Ireland and Pakistan to have any realistic chance of going through to the World Cup semis. I'm going to be realistic and say I don't expect West Indies women to make it to the World Cup semis. Even if everyone's fit, even if Stefani's back, Aliyah Elaine, Chanel Henry, Shakira Selman, Shadeen Nation, even if Anisa Mohammed came out of came out of her leave right now and said, I'm in, which she won't, by the way, but even if she did, even if Deandra came back, I'd still say that it'd be a struggle. So we're going to need some luck on our side, right? Because I think it's fair to say that England compared to us, that is that kind of gap. India is like that, but again, we would need luck on our sides. Players on the England and India side would have to have really bad games, and we would have to play at our absolute perfect best with no dropping of standards by anyone to have any chance of beating England or India in the group stages. So I think the realistic aim for this team in the upcoming World Cup is beat Ireland, beat Pakistan. That's the minimum. That's the bare minimum. And then after that, it's about, can they pull off what would be seen as a shock win versus India or England? And that's really, I guess, that would be over exceeding the expectations, given where the England and India, given where they are comparatively to where we are in our current state of development, if that's the right word, in international cricket. So listen, people, I just kind of wanted to, I don't want to call it the state of the women's game, because that's not what it is. I kind of just wanted to touch base with everyone, because again, I'm always of the view that when people talk about West Indies cricket, they don't talk about women's cricket in any great depth. Some people do, but a lot of people just seemingly ignore it. And if we're going to purport to be, as the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, if we're going to purport to be the one-stop shop for West Indies cricket and the place where you'll get the best analysis on West Indies cricket. When we say West Indies cricket, we mean all cricket. We don't just mean the men playing in Zimbabwe and so on and so forth. It's about covering all aspects of West Indian teams and what's going on for them. But as usual, people, get in the comments below. Let me know what you think about some of the stuff that I've said. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to Caribbean Cricket Podcast. And of course, if you're listening to this on an audio podcast feed, then at us at Carib Cricket, Twitter and Instagram. And like I say, the new Caribbean Cricket Podcast maroon test caps, get at me if you're interested in getting one. But that's me, people. That's another edition of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Thank you and good night.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.